Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
Once again, I'm Don Mazzella. My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment, but we have Rick Miller with us today. He's got a great new book whose title I really like, Be Chief. It's a choice, not a title. Rick, welcome to the program.
Hey, Don, great to be with you.
Okay. Before we go any further, Rick, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your company, and your website.
Well, a little bit about myself. I've, like you, Don, I've done a lot of different things. I've worked in companies ranging as small as a startup to as large as a multinational. Worked with a lot of great people along the way. Grew up outside of Boston, but my travels have taken me around the world. I had an opportunity to learn from lots of great people. And my company is called Being, B-E-I-N-G, Chief. And it's where I try to work with people sometimes who have chief titles, sometimes they don't. But it's all about building businesses and that achieve sustainable growth. Growth in 1 quarter or 1 year is great, but whether it's personally, professionally, you kind of want to learn to grow on a consistent basis. So those are the things that I play with.
Okay, and your website?
The website is Being, B-E-I-N-G, Chief, CHIEF.com.
Well, okay, now you've written a book. Which I, by the way, found fascinating. Tell us a little bit about it and what is the main aims of the book.
Well, thank you. The book is called Be Chief. It's a choice, not a title, and it really is some of the lessons that I've learned in a lot of years in business. It doesn't matter what size company. The challenge is always the same. The challenge is how do you help people to bring out their A game, or how do you help yourself to bring your A game? The word chief, Don, is often associated with power. And in the past, you would think about chief coming with authority and control, and that would come from a position, whether it's the chief executive officer or the chief financial officer. And there was a power, if you will, in that title. And today I think we find that organizations that are successful and people that are successful define power a little differently. It's about energy and clarity and confidence and influence and impact that we can all have. So the book is all about how to identify choices that anybody can make, whether they're on the front line or they're in the corner office, to make themselves more powerful.
Well, can you give us a couple of those choices?
Sure. I mean, one of the examples about energy. A lot of people think that you can get more energy if you have that second cup of coffee, or you drink a little Mountain Dew, or you have some 5-hour energy. And that may be a short-term way of getting energy, but the research that I've done and some of the organizations that I've worked from make me believe that the energy really comes from the inside. So there's an opportunity for all of us to get some energy by being a little bit more centered as people. Being a little bit more accepting and generous and grateful, and being a little bit more present and focusing our energy on the current moment. So there's little tips and tricks, Don, that any of us can do to increase our energy and our focus. And those are some of the tips and tricks that I've used in organizations, I said, from all sizes. And the good news is generally these things have had quite an impact on the top line and bottom line of organizations.
Well, give us a couple of things that you've done that are tricks that to add this energy.
Well, the synergy, really comes in all different angles. So the thing that I would offer your readers, your listeners, is that while I've got a book certainly that I'm interested in promoting here, because all all of the proceeds of the book go to support special needs kids. So I really want to put a lot of money in those kids' hands so they can be more successful in the organizations that support special needs kids. But on the website, beingchief.com, somebody can take a quick survey and actually get a score, Don, about how powerful they are. They can actually get a numeric score to determine what is their score with energy, what is their score with confidence and impact and influence and clarity, and that'll help them make some simple choices to increase their power and their effectiveness. And I think those are the things, and again, totally free for your listeners. They can get a kind of a glimpse in terms of what the book goes a little bit deeper into.
Well, I'm I'm 75, as my audience knows. And I certainly don't have the energy I did 20 years ago. I don't know whether I can lead. I've led groups before, but isn't age one way that your energy slows?
Well, a certain kind of energy, no question about it. You might not have the ability to leap up a bunch of stairs as quickly, Don, as you once did. But again, I'm defining energy a little bit differently because, frankly, there's a wisdom of your 75 years, and there's an understanding of who you are. And I believe that the term chief, by the way, is sometimes best defined as connecting what you do to who you are. So I got to believe, Don, that after 75 years, you and your listeners have a pretty good idea about who Don is. And my guess is that you kind of make choices that are consistent with who you are. And those choices, I think, make you a chief. And I think those are the simple choices that maybe somebody who doesn't have your wisdom, your length of experience, might be able to look at this, either the free compass survey that I mentioned earlier, or the book, and provide some examples about maybe you don't have to wait 75 years to pull together all the wisdom that you have, and maybe there are some shortcuts.
Well, you're right about that. And God, what do they say? I wish I knew when I was 21 what I know now, but I'd still make the same mistakes. But it's very true. We're talking, by the way, with Rick Miller. He's got a wonderful new book called Be Chief. It's a choice, not a title. I got to tell you, Rick, I just like the title, and that's one of the reasons you're on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it, Don, very much. Don, let me ask you a question. In your 75 years, my guess is the people who have had the most impact on you, my guess is they didn't necessarily have a title. Is that true?
I have to think about it.
A relative or somebody in the neighborhood or somebody you've known your whole life who has a big impact on you?
Well, I've been fortunate. I had an editor that when I was a young callow reporter that made me cry twice, but taught me how to be a reporter. And since I've been in the news business, I mean, obviously my parents affected me, and my teachers affected me, but who have always helped me have been, again, reporters are kind of a different breed. We're taught, or at least we were taught, to help each other, which I'm not, by the way, finding is not the case today. But that's for another time. But
that's such a great lesson, though, Don. And you in your introduction, your kind introduction to me, you mentioned that I've done some things in business. One of the things that I'm described as is an unconventional turnaround specialist. And I think the unconventional part comes from a lot of turnaround people in business understand that they're responsible to fix the top line, the bottom line. But much like you're describing, the thing that makes me a little unconventional is my dad was in human resources growing up. And he taught me that one of the most important things in business, and this doesn't get a lot of coverage either, is to be kind. So you're talking about reporters who have a kindness that perhaps you don't see as much now as you did in one day, but I believe whether it's called unconventional or a little different, whether it's the reporter that you're mentioning or my dad who taught me how to be kind in business, I think that's so important.
Well, you're very true. And if I may, I will tell you, I covered the first Consumer Electronics Show, and covered the first 20 of them, which is the large consumer show in Las Vegas. And in the press room, were a group of people, and such a huge show, and no one could cover it properly. We would share information, okay? But in the last few years, God forbid anybody should share any information in that press room. It's just one example where the world has changed. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about you, because I'd much rather our audience hear from you, because you're the expert and you're the turnaround person. Which in a turnaround where you have people who are fearful of the job, fearful of what's going to happen next, being kind is absolutely one of the most critical factors in success. What do you say to that?
No, I think you're spot on. In the book I tell a particular story about when I was hired as the first outsider in AT&T's 100-year history at the time to come in and turn around a multi-billion-dollar unit. And I was standing in front of a number of hundred of employees, and we were talking about a voluntary retirement package. And one of the employees stood up and said, it was a little bit frustrated and a little flustered, and said, I'm not sure I know what to do about this early retirement package because of the health benefits, and my wife has cancer, and while you might not care about that, and he was looking at me as someone who was high up in the org chart, had a big title, he said, you guys at the top, you guys don't worry about that stuff, but down here, it matters. And I stopped and I said to him, and I had never said this before, Don. I kind of came out I came out with something that no one expected. I said, I don't talk a lot about it. Matter of fact, I don't think I've ever said it before, but I'm a cancer survivor. And I got to tell you, you could have heard a pin drop, by the way, at this point, several hundred people. I said, so I do care about what happens with things like cancer, and we're all people. We've got to make decisions what are good for ourselves and our families, and so just to try and be a little empathetic to this individual who was clearly struggling as he tried to get his question out, and we worked through the specifics of the health care issue that he had, but just to show that we're all human, right? And unfortunately, it doesn't happen as much as it could. But in this big organization where people were very influenced by titles and levels and all that silliness, just being a little kind and a little empathetic went so far.
What seems to be happening, I have many people on this show who talk about various things, and they talk about kindness. But it seems to me in this day and age, we seem to be losing our perspective on it. We've lost it in politics. We've lost it in many different areas where the search for power seems to be the dominant emotion, rather than what you're saying, which I believe in, which is let's be kinder and nicer to our fellow workers. What do you say to that?
Right. No, I think that's right, and I think as I say in the title of the book, kindness is a choice. We were not. Nobody's programmed to be kind or unkind. It is a choice that's available to all of us. And you're right when you say that some people are focused on accumulating power. But I think that's the old definition of power. That's where power was authority and control over things and some element of supremacy. Where I think today people are searching for power, but I think it's the power that I talk about in the book, where power is clarity and confidence and the ability to make an impact, a positive impact. And I think those are things that are not limited to people who have titles.
That's very true, but oftentimes I have an expression that I learned, the tyranny of the little people. It seems to me, when you deal with people in the bureaucracies, in government, in the post office, etc., there seems to be a feeling that I'm here and I have to be here, so I'm going to make it as hard as I can for you. You merely have to walk into a government office to get that sense of that. and sometimes into big corporations. Well, again, what do you say to that?
Well, I think there are people who could be described that way in all walks of life. You can find people who are stubborn and not focused on helping a customer. You can find them in a small business. You can find them in a corporation. You can find them in government. You can find them in a hospital. You can find them everywhere, just as you can find people who are making a different choice to be responsive and to be respectful and to be kind. You find plenty of those people in those same places, and it really does come down to where people are coming from, what choices they're making. And you're right, there are examples in all walks of life of people who unfortunately make things harder for people, but there's also many people in all walks of life who choose differently, and thank goodness for them.
Yes, but my worry is that the former is overwhelming the latter. I don't know about you. Seeing you have a 973, you might be in New Jersey, but sometimes I have to park on Park Avenue waiting for 6 o'clock to get. And I watch people walk by, and they're not smiling. Everybody is grim-faced, and you sit there and wonder about it. Why? Well, we're living in an age where the world has never seen before, and yet they seem so grim-faced about things.
No question. And by the way, there's statistics, Don, that back that up. And one of the reasons I wrote the book, some of the success that lessons my dad taught me, being a human resource guy, he taught me at the kitchen table about kindness, and I've certainly brought those as an unconventional turnaround guide to a lot of different organizations. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was that it's well reported that across any size of business, whether it's business or small or large, generally the quotes are, Don, that 7 out of 10 people are not happy. 7 out of 10. Now, you could argue, boy, the way, hey, you could say, Rick, I know people where it's 9 out of 10, and I wouldn't argue with you. But generally, across a broad spectrum, 7 out of 10 people are not, what I say, bringing their A game to work every day because they feel powerless. They feel like they're not heard. They feel like they can't step up. There's a lot of victim mentality. So the book is really written for the frontline employee who might not have the title. And I say to people, you can be more powerful. You can have more confidence and energy and influence if you're just aware of your own choices. Now, again, there's certainly some things that we can't control, and the serenity prayer is there for everyone, right? God grant me the serenity to accept what I can't change what I can, and know there's a difference. So I'm not going to try and redo that. But there are some choices that are available to all of us to make the best of the hand that we're dealt.
We're talking with Rick Miller, who's written a wonderful new book called Be Chief. It's a choice, not a title. Again, love the title. Where can people get it, Rick?
Well, they can get it on Amazon right now. The good news is it came out in September and very quickly became an Amazon #1 new release in 2 categories, both leadership training as well as business management. So I was excited and surprised. Never expected that kind of reception. But you can go to my book page, which is bechief.com, or you can go right to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It's in a lot of different places, and the good news is it seems to be helping a lot of people. And as I said earlier, excited that all proceeds are going to help kids with special needs. So make a great gift for the holidays and help kids along the way.
Well, the obvious question, as a reporter, I'll ask you, why that particular charity?
Well, it really came from a story that's in the book. One of the greatest teachers that I've ever had was a special needs girl. She was 6 years old and cerebral palsy. She was in a wheelchair when I met her. I was working as a volunteer at a rehabilitation hospital, and we spent time in a 100-degree heated pool stretching the muscles of some of these wonderful kids. And I was working with a certified therapist when I met a girl named Melissa. And when I met her, I saw her on the side of the pool. She was sitting in her wheelchair, patiently waiting her turn. Yet when she got in the pool, she was one of the hardest working people I've ever worked with. She was totally focused. She was very generous with her smile, and she was very grateful by saying thank you at the end of each of our sessions. And she to me, Dawn, was a true chief. She was hardworking. She was accepting of her situation, but she was making the most of her own situation. And when I think about all the people around us, so many people are what we would call disadvantaged, yet everyone has something to teach somebody else. So it really is in Melissa's honor that I very happily donate every dollar that comes to me to special needs kids, because I think these are people who can be wonderful teachers. Sometimes we don't look at them that way, but you can.
I was for a time. I turned around Exceptional Parent magazine for the publishing group, so I know how you feel about that. These kids sometimes really get to you.
They do.
And interesting enough, we now face another dilemma as we find that we're enabling these kids to live longer into adulthood. We now have the future problem of integrating them into society as well, and that's going to be a major problem going forward. Or as
no
someone
question.
said,
No question. There's another one, by the way. So I've got I know of an organization called Potentia that was just formed. Their focus is on kids who are on the spectrum, and whether it's formerly Asperger's or autistic kids who are challenged to grow up. But what happens? How do you get them jobs? So here's an organization called Potentia that's focused on matching kids on the spectrum with employers who are committed to what they call neurological diversity. And some of these kids can do amazing, and young adults can do amazing things in particular jobs. So you're right, it's a challenge, but more and more people are stepping up to understand what can be done.
Well, as someone said, it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity. But and I found that interesting. But I don't know if you've seen the program, The Good Doctor.
I have.
Fascinating. I love having guests like these, where we're really exploring many different aspects. Can I also? I'm going to impose myself and tell you that my life was forever changed by a human resource person named John Van Tassel. I needed a job to go to college, and I walked into NBC News, and he said, we don't have any jobs except up here in the newsroom as a copy boy. And I got a lifetime career out of that referral.
Amazing. Yeah, people in human resources do many of them do a marvelous job, and I am biased because my dad was one, but you've got your own story as well.
We all do, some good, some bad. But in the time we have left, why don't we summarize some of your thoughts from the book for our audience? We're talking, by the way, with Rick Miller. He's got a wonderful new book, Be Chief. It's a choice, not a title. Rick, some other ideas you have from the book that our audience might like to hear?
Well, again, the book, Don, is really for two groups of people. It certainly is for the people who are on the front lines and don't have titles and want to be more powerful. But there are an awful lot of lessons in the book for people who might have a managerial role and have, whether it's a small team or a group or a division or even a company. And one of my favorites is the work that we talk about with the quiet chiefs. Generally, 50% of any organization are introverts. Yet many of the times that we try to create situations for introverts to bring out their best are really designed for extroverts. So I'll give you one specific example. I do a lot of work with clients who want to have a brainstorming session. So what they do is they'll bring all the extroverts together and the introverts and say, okay, everybody raise your hand and give me your good ideas. Well, an introvert's going to keep their hand down. Well, what would happen if the night before you had that meeting, you sent out an email and you said, hey, for anybody that wants to contribute in a different way, here's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And here's the topic, and email me something maybe the night before if you'd like to. And it's a little tip that I offer in the book, but it's amazing when you give introverts a way for them to contribute that fits who they are. The contributions you get will just blow you away. So you walk into that meeting the next day and you've got a head start on all things that that introverts might offer, and they'll offer them willingly. They'll do an incredible amount of detail. Some will stay up all night because you gave them an opportunity to contribute, but they didn't have to stand up and be vocal in an open audience. It's just not who they are. So the book is just chock full of tips on how you can create organizations, whether it's a small team or a big organization, to get the best out of everybody and make them feel good about it.
That is a wonderful tip. I never even thought of that. I'm sure a lot of our audience did. Can you give us one more?
Sure. Well, again, for the introverts, which, again, I love focusing on them. In a prior life, I had the privilege of leading a group of Bell Laboratories scientists, some of the smartest people on the planet. Today we looked at companies like Google and Apple, but back in the day, Bell Labs had more patents than anybody. And when I led that group, I learned about the wonderful tips it takes to create environments. And we talked about email, but just creating workspaces. We always think that open workspaces are the right answer to everybody, right? But they're not. Creating smaller spaces for people to contribute in a way that'll give them some privacy. Privacy is not a bad thing. Not that you can construct individual offices for everybody, but just be aware of what those quiet chiefs need to succeed. And whether it's a little bit more time or emails or the space, those are things that allow people, teams can do wonderful things, but don't shy away from allowing individuals to contribute. And by the way, sometimes anonymity can be a good thing. Somebody might want to offer a suggestion, but they don't want their name tied to it, not because they don't believe in it, but that's just not who they are. And again, we're so used to a culture where everybody wants to get credit for their idea. Sometimes people don't want that, and you just have to be tuned to that.
That's really true. I worked for Bell Labs for 9 months, and watching those scientists work was like watching paint dry. But then what came out of that was truly amazing stuff. You're absolutely right on that. But it was interesting. E.E. David, who ran the lab at that time, said an interesting thing. Genius does not guarantee success, but it does guarantee that we'll get great ideas. And he made it a point to give the scientists what they wanted. I never forgot that. We have just a couple of seconds left. Can you give us just one more? Because these are absolutely terrific ideas.
Well, again, we've talked a little bit about the introverts. The only thing I would offer is kind of walking the talk. Trying to bring your personal life, back in the day when you were at Bell Labs and I was starting, there was all this discussion about keeping a separation between your personal life and your professional life. Keep that stuff at home. Boy, today that could not be farther from the truth. If you want to engage individuals, show them your humanness. Right? I'm not saying spend all day talking about your significant other, your kids, your family, but bring enough of it into the workplace so that people know that you are a person. Right? You have a set of values that you follow at home. They're the same ones you follow at the work. Bring your ethics with you, and just be a real person, and don't try and put on this air. I remember when I got out of business school, there was all this discussion about when you have to show up, you have to put on your game face. Well, be who you are. Connect what you do to who you are. Be a chief, even though you don't have the title.
Oh, absolutely. On that note, we're going to unfortunately end today. But Rick, your title of your book again, and how people can get it.
Yeah, it's the title of the book is Be Chief. It's a choice, not a title. It's for frontline workers, no matter where you are in the organization. Although I'm getting a lot of response from people in education and medical and government that seems to get quite a response. They can go to get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or they can go to the book page at bechief.com.
Thank you so much. A link to your website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future program. And you can tell us a guest you'd like to hear. But in the meantime, Rick Miller, thank you so much for being with us. It was a really great time.
Thanks, Don. Thanks very much for the time.
Dan Perkins here from recalculating.biz with your featured book, I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, "If you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there," is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Our next guest is Barbara Marder. She's Global Innovation Leader at Mercer, and we'll hear from her right after this commercial.
Life. It's made up of the simple day-to-day moments that keep us all running on full of joy, passion, and restlessness. It's singing full on to your car radio with the windows wide open. It's a whole bunch of early morning rush hours and a few late-night runs for Rocky Road. It's full of pit stops and drive-thrus. It's life, and we live it between fill-ups at Valero. Valero top-tier certified quality fuel keeps your engine running cleaner, better, and longer. Find a station near you at ValeroCleanGas.com.
Our next guest is Barbara Marder. She's Global Innovation Leader at Mercer, and she's here to discuss why small businesses need to concern themselves with human resources. Barbara, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Barbara, tell us, you have a survey, you have some thoughts, and you have a new service. Tell us and a little bit about Mercer, which some of our audience may not be aware of.
Absolutely. Mercer is an HR consulting firm, and we help companies, mostly larger organizations, in the areas of health, wealth, and careers. So we work with companies around the world in those areas and impact over 100 million employees' lives every day. But what's interesting is that last year, Mercer launched Mercer People Pro, which is specifically designed for small businesses. And we actually have created a completely different business model to do that because, the typical Mercer model and the fee structure and all of that is, very reasonable for mid to larger companies, but sometimes challenging for small businesses.
Well, having said that, why do small businesses need HR?
Well, it's a really interesting question because Mercer People Pro works with what we would call micro businesses, really, startups, a few people, all the way up through to, companies who are somewhere in the area of about 250 employees. And the way these companies grow, for the most part, is a lot of them are growing fast and adding groups of employees pretty quickly. And I think what's so interesting is that all of a sudden a business that started with a few people is now a business of 10 people, 20 people, 100 people. And not only are the legal requirements different as these businesses grow and thrive, but also just the policies and the culture need to come along with the business as well. What a CEO of a startup needs to do when there's 5 people working very closely with them is quite different than when they're 50 people or 100 people. And many of the small businesses will start off without a human resource person at all. One of the employees, whether it's the CEO or the founder, will play that role with whatever support. But the needs get greater as companies grow, and we actually believe that setting a foundation for human resources and employee policies and things like that as companies continue to add new employees and they grow, and some of the issues that they find themselves dealing with are much more complex. Had they laid the groundwork early, a lot of those issues could have been avoided in the first place. And I think you've even seen some very, very high-profile large companies that have grown super fast, out of the Silicon Valley, for example, are now dealing with human resource issues that, had they had policies in place in the earlier days and the culture of the business had, grown up with that in mind, those things probably could have been avoided.
Dan, I'm going to ask one more question and turn it over to you, if I may. But
sure.
I saw a study that less than 18% of small businesses even have written employment manuals, and that alone can cause problems. What do you say to that?
Absolutely, and the number, certainly the number doesn't surprise me, but thinking about the cost and the effort to put together an employee handbook that at least covers the nuts and bolts of what you'd want a policy to cover, the expense there is not significant. And, it's certainly something that Mercer People Pro can help companies with, and there are, templates even to get started with. But just having something like that in place can prevent a whole myriad of issues that are going to come up down the road as the businesses get bigger. So it's to me, it just feels short-sighted when, even a very small business can have at least the minimal range of policies covered, and then at least they have something to come back to as, the business gets more complex and new issues arise. So it seems like a very reasonable spend for a small business.
Dan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, just to follow up on that, I understand your perspective that it seems like a reasonable expense, but I wonder if a small business person, somebody who employs less than 5 or 10 people, which makes up a huge percentage of the small businesses in this country.
Right.
I wonder if the owners, once you hire somebody, your business changes. I at one time had a business where I had 3 or 4 people working for me out in the hinterlands. They weren't even in the same office with me. And now I'm down to me. So I wonder if part of the reason many, I won't say all, but a number of small businesses don't have an employee manual or don't have HR resources is because the owner doesn't believe it's necessary. I wonder if that's the biggest obstacle.
Yeah, no, I think what you described is a huge obstacle, and often with a business of that size, the owner have handpicked the people, and you feel confident in them and how they're going to approach work and how you're going to deal with things. So that all feels very comfortable, and there doesn't feel like a need for anything, more heavy, more structure. But what I've always said as well, that if you're a small business that wants to work with, for example, larger companies, larger companies do have sort of policies around the companies that they work with. And for example, if let's say a larger company's data, confidential data, is going to be exposed to your employees, then should there be background checks done? Are they going to be comfortable with the people who are touching their information? So, again, I do think what are the aspirations of the small business, and what will you need to have in place should the business thrive and be very successful? And I think in a lot of those cases, even a small business could start very early with things that are going to be important to your clients.
Would you say that it's more likely that in the interview process, that a larger company interviewing a smaller company, and maybe I'm being oversimplistic here, but that the bigger company is going to want to see what, quote, systems the potential partner or supplier has, and just taking your example, how do you protect our information? Is there a naivete on some businesses that don't check, or am I wrong there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that all companies have the same policies around companies that they're doing business with, but certainly as I've responded to requests for proposals and requests for information and just contracting in the normal course of business, and again, many of the larger companies that I'm sure a lot of the small businesses would like to work with, they're going to require certain things to happen as part of that relationship, especially if, confidential data, or as you're saying, systems that integrate and could, impact their operations. They're just going to have to be in place before the small business would be able to work with some of these companies. So I think from a business perspective, some of this is just good business. From the sort of employment relationship and the culture and, how the workplace interacts with each other, that's kind of a different way of looking at it. I think, truthfully, when you look at it from both sides, it just makes sense to get some of these things nailed down and policies around certain things earlier versus later.
Dan, let me interrupt our guest and you for just a moment. We have to take a break for one of our advertisers, but we'll be right back with Barbara Marder from Mercer.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
We're back with Dan Perkins, my co-host, and Barbara Marder. She's Global Innovation Leader at Mercer. And we're talking about her new offering, I guess you would say it, for human resources. Dan, back to you.
Thank you, Don. Barbara, what does a Global Innovation Leader do?
That's a great question, isn't it? Well, first of all, the role is new. I've just been appointed the Global Innovation Leader in the last few weeks. But I've actually been part of innovation at Mercer for the last few years. And so part of, basically my role is to oversee innovation that's happening across Mercer. And that innovation takes, many different shapes and forms. And there's also many different stages of innovation as well. So, for example, with Mercer People Pro, that was launched last year, and I'm now overseeing the kind of go-to-market and commercialization strategy for Mercer People Pro, while for other innovations, they may be actually back in the very early stages of ideation and product development. So it's really overseeing the innovation cycle from start to finish and across multiple things that we're innovating at the same time in all different parts of the world.
Barbara, under your People Pro, you said it's about a year old. Are there a lot of similar challenges that you're seeing that the people that are coming to you have? I'm not saying that it's routine, but sometimes there are just basic fundamental flaws that happen all the time and people just don't see them. So are you seeing anything in particular that seems to have boiled to the top as a problem that seems to be in this small business segment that you're working in?
There's definitely themes in terms of the kinds of projects that we've done over the past year, and we've done, many. And again, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're related to flaws in the business, but I think a great example is a lot of the work we do is around pay benchmarking, and that could be both for employees, new hires, or executives. And one of the reasons that even these small businesses want the experience of Mercer is that often they're needing to bring that to their board or their advisors in terms of getting those pay packages or incentives approved. And again, that's where Mercer's experience and credibility working with much larger organizations lends that credibility even to the small business who's looking to get this approved by the board. So a lot around compensation, pay benchmarking, compensation strategies, a lot around communications, communicating with employees, for example, a lot around policies and audits and things like that, training and coaching of executives. So definitely kind of a common theme around those kinds of things. Interestingly, I think from a health and wealth perspective, while we certainly can provide that kind of assistance, and we've definitely been asked to almost be an extension of an HR team for open enrollment, for example, we can do kind of this temporary placement. A lot of the times the small businesses are getting advice for health and wealth through their brokers or through providers. So in those areas, typically they'd be coming to Mercer People Pro for something that's out of scope for the kind of advice that those brokers or providers can offer.
I need to ask Don, how much time do I have with Barbara?
You got 5 minutes, actually 7 minutes. Dan.
Okay, good. We're going to have some more fun. Barbara, what I want to know now is how has the change in the direction of the economy affected your business? We know that in the first 7 months of this year, we've added 1 million new employees to the workforce. Plants are being opened and new jobs are going to be created and companies are expanding. They're even reopening old coal mines and drilling and digging for new coal mines, which was unheard of in this country. So there's a lot of changes that are going on. And what we heard for a number of years on our other show is that, and heard on this show, people in small business, that it was the 8 years of the Obama administration, and I'm not making a political statement here, I'm just talking about what they told us was demonstrated by the fact that the economy did not grow at anywhere near its potential. So that a lot of people who came on that were working in small business and had small businesses or supporting small businesses have told us that those were very difficult times, and as their business contracted, they had to lay off people. But now it seems that the economy has turned And I'm wondering if you're seeing any turn in the economy in your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting question, and it definitely. So I think, first of all, from the perspective of, in terms of employment and being able to find easily exactly the talent that you need, I would say that businesses both small and large are struggling and will struggle more as unemployment rates get lower, and it's just the war for talent, as we've always called it, heats up then. So then you've got small businesses competing with large companies for talent, and in some cases the small business is exactly where some of the freshest new talent wants to work, and partly because of the unstructured way the businesses are and lots of flexibility and things like that. So I think in some cases the small business will still be very attractive to a lot of the folks who are looking for a more interesting and flexible working environment. But what those small businesses can offer in terms of benefits and perks and rewards and things will be challenging to compete with the larger companies. So I could definitely see that as a challenge. But I think one other interesting sort of phenomenon about what's happening with the way work is getting done is it actually really plays into the Mercer People Pro business model, because we're basically employing Mercer alumni of Mercer clients who, for whatever reason, want to work more flexibly. So they're willing to exchange, pay and benefits and things like that for completely flexible work environment that allows them to work around their own schedules. So, basically the People Pros are a completely flexible workforce that sets their own hours and when they want to work and how they want to work, but still allows small businesses to tap into their expertise. And, the projections are that by 2020, 50% of the workforce will be flexible workers or part of the gig economy, whether that's, full-time, part-time, side hustle kind of work. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how businesses respond to, workers' desire for more flexibility and controlling when and how they work and where they work. I think that's going to be interesting for both small and larger businesses.
Barbara, we don't have much time left, but I want to follow up your comment because we've had several people.
Dan.
Okay, we've had several people on the show who've talked about people who thought they wanted to work at home, that they changed their mind because there's no social interaction with the employees in the office. And they felt after a while that they had become isolated from their employer. I'm not saying it's a huge situation, but enough that it's been raised a couple of times on the show that one of the challenges about remote working is the remoteness of working. And so I'm wondering if that's a fad that's declining, or is it still strong, or what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting perspective, and I think you've even seen some high-profile companies calling back work at home and remote workers. So, there are definitely pros and cons from both sides, from the business side, from the worker side, in terms of flexibility and remote working and things like that. My personal perspective is that as more and more people are working from home, and as the technologies for video interfaces and things like that become more affordable and more mainstream, the work-at-home people will more or less feel like they are connecting with their colleagues and their peers. They're able to see them, not just talk to them, and that even flexible gig economy workers who maybe aren't even attached to a specific company will start to build communities around them where they get that interaction with peers, even though they're not even working for the same company. So I do think as more and more people are working remotely, are part of the gig economy, yes, I think they still will want that community around them. It's just going to be more interesting and innovative ways of how they make that happen.
I know that on my own personal experience, I'm a writer, and one of the things that I do, I'm a writer, and I'm part of the gig economy because I have two agencies, lobbyist firms in Washington, D.C., that hire me to write a commentary on specific issues that their clients are concerned with. I don't think I've even talked to them on the phone. I get probably 2 to 3 assignments every couple of weeks, and I communicate with them by email. My editor, I communicate with them with email. I do occasionally talk to them on the phone. Never talk to the customer, and yet I conduct an ongoing business that allows me to write for somebody else, not as an employee but as a contractor, and it provides income for me and content that they're looking for and perspective. So that's probably the extreme of a remote person, but I'm very comfortable with that environment. If I had to be making decisions for a business and implementing it for a business remotely might be a tough thing to do.
I don't know that every person is, really well suited for the kind of remote working and environment that you were just suggesting, Dan. I do think people need to understand themselves. And for example, if you're someone who has a terrible time filtering out distractions, working at home with all the distractions of being at home or, kids running in or whatever. I mean, you need to understand yourself and see if you're the type of person that's likely to be successful that way. But I know I've spoken to many people who feel like they're way more productive working at home because they don't have the typical office distractions and they don't have to add the commute time. They can work during that commute time. So, I think you do have to know yourself and see, make sure you're introspective about if that's going to be well suited.
Unfortunately, Barbara, we've run out of time. Barbara, tell people how they can reach you, your website, your new offering.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in Mercer, which is Mercer.com, or specifically for the small business, MercerPeoplePro.com, please visit our website. We have blogs, and personally, if someone wanted to reach me, it's barbara.marder@mercer.com. So thanks for the discussion.
Barbara, will you spell out your name?
Sure. It's Barbara, and the last name is Marder, Marder.
Thank you so much for being with us. I know I learned a lot. I think Dan as well.
Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your small business tip of the day. How is your vision? I'm not talking about your eyesight, but rather, can you see the changes coming in your business or industry? The ability to see what's coming can give you an edge over your competition. Industry magazines can be a great help to see changes coming to your business. You get the magazines because you belong to a group. Use the resource of your group or association to keep yourself current. You're paying for it anyway, why not use this resource? If you keep yourself abreast of what's happening, you will be able to make the changes to enhance your opportunity to grow your business. So here's your Recalculating.biz small business tip of the day. The next time you get one of those membership magazines in the mail, sit down and read it cover to cover. You just might uncover a new opportunity. I'm Dan Perkins from Recalculating.biz with your small business tip of the day. Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your small business tip of the day. Small business funding is easier these days thanks to a new breed of lender called fintech lenders. These internet-based lenders cut the time between applying for funds and getting the funds to just hours instead of months. They also make it easier to repay your loans, but their costs might be a little higher for their service. The next time you need dollars for your small business, try them. You might like the change. I'm Dan Perkins for Recalculating.biz and your small business tip of the day.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.